So welcome to today's episode on the Moving from Fear to Trust series. And I'm joined today by Clodagh Finn. And Clodagh is here with me in studio inside my office, my haven, in Tralee in County Kerry. And I'm really excited to have you. So
thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here, Aisling. Thank you so much for inviting me.
And thank you so much for allowing my dog Sophia to
turn up. To take beautiful,
yeah, she's up on the lap here, lads. And she is going to be having puppies in 2 weeks, so we'll excuse her because she probably just needs a little extra comforting, and
she'd be welcome anyway. She's lovely.
She loves it. So Clodagh, we are here today to talk about the release of your new book, Through Her Eyes. So I'm just really excited to hear about this. Is your second book, and you are also a journalist for many years. So tell me, like, what was the decision for you to I'm going to write my first book? Like, what was that like before? And just your journey up to
I used to write a column for the Examiner, and I'm always interested in what people do and what, the kind of when they meet challenges and they behave in an unexpected way, or they go against the grain to do something for good usually. And I saw a production of Smashing Times, and it was vignettes of women in war and women who did amazing things and stood up during World War II.
Right.
And one of them was the story of Mary Elms. And I'd never heard of Mary Elms before. And she risked her life to save, with her colleagues, 427 children from deportation to Nazi extermination camps.
Wow.
Yeah, in a 3-month period. And she went to jail because of it. And she was in a Gestapo prison for 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
And she was born in Cork. And I wondered, why don't we know of her? Why isn't she a household name?
Yeah.
And she had the distinction that Oskar Schindler has. I think everybody knows who Oskar Schindler.
Yeah.
She's Righteous Among the Nations, which is the award that Israel confers on non-Jews who risked their lives during the Second World War to save Jewish lives.
Yeah.
And I wrote a column saying, to my shame, I've only heard of this woman last week. And then I wrote a bigger feature. And while I was researching that, I realized that a lot of the people that she had helped were still alive.
Mm-hmm.
But now is the time to write about it because they were in their 70s and 80s.
Yeah.
And funny, actually, I think the reason we don't know about her is she wasn't alone in not speaking about what happened during the war. But somehow a shift came about 15 or 20 years ago where people who were either in concentration camps or were saved decided it was time to speak about it. They said, if we don't speak about it now, they will say it never happened.
Yeah.
So I started researching, and that became a book very easily, actually, because it sort of fell in my lap, this untold story.
Yeah.
There had been a few other tellings of it, but Gill Books gave me a contract, and I remember thinking, gosh, I'm actually writing a book now,
Yeah,
and
amazing.
I said, well, it is amazing. And I've always written since I was 10 years old. Like I kind of, my instinct is to write it down. That's what I do. But it wouldn't necessarily be an easy process.
Yeah.
Faced with the blank page, you go, oh my God, what am I going to say? Does it make sense? But somehow this book, it all fell into place. The people I needed to interview, I managed to contact 7 people she had saved from concentration camps.
That's amazing.
And it is amazing. And 2 people who remembered her from her work in Spain. She worked first during the Spanish Civil War. And it was just a story right from the telling.
Yeah.
So everything kind of came together. And she worked for the Quakers, and a lovely Quaker man was very interested in her story, and he had got all the archives from America. It's the American Friends Service Committee, that's the US Quakers, and they wrote everything down, and he gave me all those files.
Wow.
So here was this amazing body of work, and all I had to do was to put it on the page, and to weave the story together and to try to bring it out into the world.
Yeah, it was amazing.
It was. And around the same time, another Irish journalist, Paddy Butler, made a documentary, and he has also written about her. And, she was in the ether. But what amazed me, and I suppose what led to the second book, is that in general, people didn't know who she was. Both books a lot was said in 2017. There was a lot of publicity. And then I remember when my book was being launched by the Deputy Mayor of Cork, and he said, there's a new bridge going to be inaugurated in Cork. There's only one bridge named after a woman in Cork, the Nan O'Nagle Bridge.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll call the bridge after her. And I kind of thought, wouldn't that be amazing? But that probably won't happen.
Mm-hmm.
And they put it out to the public to nominate various people, and they got maybe 90 names. I nominated Marian's.
Yeah.
And I didn't think any more of it because there were, Cork people better known than her. And then in September, just before September, actually, they voted and they decided to call it the Marian's Bridge.
Wow.
And her son and his partner, Mary, lived the rest of her life in France. But two of the people she had saved or helped to save came to Cork for the opening of the bridge.
That's so special.
So special. And I happened to be invited to the school to speak at their prize day. And by pure coincidence, it was the same day these people were in town. It was the exact same day as the opening of the bridge. And I said to the school, would you like the people to come? And they said yes. And one of those was a woman who was separated from her mother when she was just 4 years old. Her father was working in the camps outside, so that saved his life. But she had nothing of her mother's, not a letter, not a photograph. And during my research, I found an account of her mother's last words spoken out the window of a train to one of Marian's colleagues. And she wrote down and she said, tell Charlotte, give her my most affectionate thoughts and 1,000 kisses. And she wrote it down. This woman posted it to where Charlotte was, but she'd never got that letter. And 71 years later, I was able to give her that letter. And then a year after that, she was in Cork and she was able to address 720 pupils in Cork and tell them to be careful that the Second World War didn't start with the gas chambers. It started with hatred and intolerance and words. And the spontaneous applause and standing ovation, I think that will stay with me for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
But I think that the people at school, I'd remember that.
Oh yeah.
And
that's so powerful.
So powerful. And it was just the recording of a woman's story. I got so much out of it. It was such a positive experience. This brave, courageous woman working away to do the right thing. She said, I didn't do anything special. I just saw these people were in danger and she put herself at risk to put them in the back of her car and drive them to safe homes. And I just thought that that's a great message, particularly now. Yeah. And I suppose that's what led me on then to look for other, in the course of it, I came across other women. There's another Irish woman I will write more about. Yeah. And I just went, there's so many stories out there that are untold or forgotten or overlooked. And I suppose that set me looking for more. And that's how I came to this book.
That's amazing. And it really just ties into the whole theme of moving from fear to trust, because I think in my own journey, when you're in a very challenging situation and you find yourself kind of at a rock bottom, I think it's so important to have role models that you can look to for their strength, their courage, and kind of draw from their courage into your own story.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I love looking at women in the past, because although it's a little bit sad that they're all gone, but their stories are complete and you can see how it turned out. Yeah. And Marian's, when she spent her 35th birthday in jail and the windows were boarded up and she heard shots, people being executed. Can you imagine what that was like? Yeah. And she was afraid she was going to be sent on a train into the east, and she got through. And just the story, and she was a very stoic lady. I think I mightn't be as stoic, but she did. She just got through, and I think one of the things that got her through, she shared a flat with a woman who ended up in Ravensbrück, which is a really horrible detention centre for women, and I think she probably witnessed terrible things. But afterwards, Mary didn't speak to anybody else. But I think she and this particular woman shared those moments together. She was her witness when she got married, and she was the godmother to her daughter. And I think, you know, you have these special connections with people who go through a similar experience, as you say. And you can just say, yes, this is what it was like, you know. I think that's how she might have got through.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, because it's like you need to have that support from someplace, and it can show up through people.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So within this process now of this book, which I'll show you all because it's out now, so a great time to get it for Christmas and for your times of cocooning, a nice book by the fire, Through Her Eyes, and that's available. That's in Easton's and all good bookstores.
And online as well.
So it's a new history of Ireland in 21 women. And so was it basically like, okay, I'm gonna start looking for these women and these stories just emerged? Like, what was that process of discovery like for you?
The first woman I came across was Sister Concepta, and she will have an anniversary in 2020. She painted this most magnificent oratory.
Oh yeah, I love that story. Yeah.
And she was in an enclosed order, and I suppose it was around the time of 1916, and Irishmen had gone out to fight World War II, but while they were away, 1916 happened and the tide changed. So when they came back, they weren't even ignored. They were kind of vilified for fighting for the British Army. But she was a Dominican nun, and the Dominicans, they built this oratory in praise of peace and to remember the pupils, their own pupils who fought in World War II.
Yeah.
And her father was the father of Celtic art. And they said, she was the art teacher in the school, and they said, will you paint it? And she sent her teacher out. She couldn't go outside the convent doors, and she sent her teacher up to Glasgow up the road to get household paint. And they were delighted to see her coming because in the Ireland of the 20s, it was all beige and green. You know? And they had loads of pots of vivid paints that nobody wanted, but Sister Concepta wanted them because she painted these fantastic reds and oranges blues, these mythical birds and pelicans, and designs very reminiscent of the manuscripts. And the Book of Kells in particular. But she's her own design, and she did this kind of after the school day. She got 2 planks and put them across a ladder and went up on top of them, and with her habit pinned it underneath her, and she worked away in the cold lamplit oratory. And the nuns would say they'd know when she was coming for dinner because they'd smell her. They'd smell the paint coming, you know. She did that for 16 years, even though she was sick. And it'll be 100 years in 2020, the painting of it. And I suggested that to the publishers, but I was afraid that I wouldn't be able to get a complete book out of it. So it made me think that 2020, I like the symmetry of 2020. And I set about thinking of my own vision of women's lives and women's history for 2020. And I sort of imagined, I've always been interested in history and in archaeology. And I remember when I went to school, I was told I couldn't be an archaeologist because there's only 2 jobs in the country.
Oh, really?
That was entirely wrong. You know? So then I said, I'd be a journalist. And I said, oh, that's even worse. They did. I'm telling
really?
you. Oh, yeah. And there was only 1 or 2 female journalists. And, you know, did I ever think of insurance or teaching?
Could you imagine?
At the bank?
Oh,
and
it would have been a sorry day if you had taken
I would have been very bad at it. And I did do various exams, you know, and I did manage to get into journalism college. I kind of said, no, I need to do this. So I wanted to look back at the possibilities, because we're always told this story of what women couldn't do. They couldn't vote, and they couldn't go to school. And my mother came to Tralee in the 50s, and when she joined Tralee Library, she had to get my father to sign the application form. You know, I said, what? And she was so bright. So I wanted to look back and think, well, what was possible? If I was a Doctor Who figure and I went into the time traveling machine, what could I find? And actually, amazing things. Because there were women who built castles, There were women who had power and influence in their own right. One of the women I think that you liked was Robert Boyle, the chemist.
Yeah.
His elder sister was in fact much better known and more respected than he was in the 17th century.
It's amazing.
It is amazing.
Yeah. And it's funny because like I just had this kind of perception that like women just didn't do those things. So for me, like this book is a real game changer in terms of like no, like we just haven't been told the stories.
I think so. I think so. And I think too it's the stories that people think are good. It's the stories of government and the stories of battle.
Yeah.
And women, while they were there, because it's a story of a woman who fought as a male soldier in the American Civil War, you know, it's just been a particular lens. And I wanted to kind of broaden the lens and see what was out there. And there's so much out there. And the theme we were talking about this is of possibility, you know, and I would say to myself and to you, we were just talking about what we can do, or you know, you do when you step outside the comfort zone, and what you have done, you know, with your online school and your mentoring, and now you're writing your own book, is that you're standing up and saying, this is how you can move from a place of fear to a place of trust, you know. And I've heard you say, which has given me great hope, saying, what am I saying? What am I doing? What am I doing? Imposter syndrome, you know. And why shouldn't you, you know? And you just say, okay, I'm not saying anything, but here's my tuppence worth, you know. And it's very challenging to stand up and put yourself above the parapet. It is. It is.
Which is why it's so good for your book in terms of just being immersed in these stories of women that did their thing.
They did their thing. They absolutely did.
And in full conviction. And you know, from all the stories, like, is there a kind of common thread you feel in terms of like what helped them, like what helped them have that strength?
Yeah. It is that sense of belief in what they believed in. It's that sense of, say for Sister Concepta, her art was her glorification of God. She was a very religious woman. Some of the women would have this idea of a higher power. Lady Ranelagh, the woman who's Robert Boyle's sister, did wonderful things. She learned Hebrew because she wanted to learn the scriptures better. And the man who taught her was amazed. He said, I didn't think women's minds were capable of this. And she advocated, for women's education. She also was very religious, but a lot of them had a belief and were driven to follow their talents and to exploit their talents. Clotell Graves, for example, was one of the first female journalists in Fleet Street. And I find her story fascinating. But she starts off writing at 3 a.m. To meet a deadline. I have been that soldier, you know.
In the trenches.
Absolutely. And, you know, she had to be down at Fleet Street to see if she could get a job. And she affected a kind of a male dress. And she smoked cigars and went fly fishing. You know, she fitted in. But at the same time, she was able to cope in a man's world. And she must have had incredible self-belief. She had very good friends because even though she was really successful critically, she was a playwright as well and an international bestseller, she couldn't make money. And the reason we know so much about her as a person is that she wrote to the Literary Fund in London to apply for funds, and we see friends of hers saying she had desperate ill health. She was in a wheelchair for 16 years of her life, and she kept writing. She had a library of 4,000 books, and that was like her Google, you know, and she wanted to keep that together. It was very much part of her fabric, and she just kept doing what she could do. She also converted to Catholicism, actually, which is interesting. That idea then that you need something bigger outside yourself, whatever it is. They're all exceptional in their own way. The women I chose. Some of them came up against terrible obstacles, but they just kept going.
I love that. And for me, that's just like kind of almost like a call to like delve into these stories for us where we are in our own journeys, and kind of, as you say, you are coming to the end of that story, but it's like to realize, I think, as well, that like your story is yours to write, you know. So I don't know, I draw great inspiration from hearing these stories, because I feel, yeah, it's like if they are there to follow their talents and, as you say, like fully exploit them and fully bring them into their life and leave their legacy, that it's like that kind of calls to us, like for us to also do the same, even when we're facing massive challenges. We're in the fear of like, what will people think of us? Who am I to say this? Everyone else is doing this already. You know, all the things that we all face. I think it's just like, you know, just to give us permission. And I think that's, you know, for me, your book is really like female empowerment to give us permission.
Do it.
To actually do what we're here to do.
And some of them, like Gemma Redmond, you were saying, the biotechnologist, she was born intersex and she suffered terrible bullying. You know, people make a split-second decision about, they look at something in your hair or the shape of your nose and they decide you don't fit in neatly. And she was punched and teased, and she just didn't have it, you know. She went on, she used that to develop a 3D printing machine that could actually print human tissue and keep it alive.
Yeah, it's phenomenal.
It's phenomenal. Even to try and get your...
It's like sci-fi, you know.
It is. Yeah. And that's what she'd say. She would say, it's sci-fi for now. And she kept at it and kept saying, no, we can reach a solution. And she did, in fact, make this 3D printing machine. And it was the first of its type in the world. And she had got a grant for 4 months, and she went off to China, I think. And then she was lugging it through the airport with her team. Yeah. And she was to show it in San Francisco. And she sets it up and she's in front of the crowd and she's been flying and she's really, really tired. Yeah. And she leans against the table and the machine falls off the table and smashes into.
Oh, I know.
Can you imagine?
Yeah. That's just like, how did that happen?
And she said, she told this story after. She kicked it under the table and went, that's grand now. We'll just go back to Cork and make a better one, which is what she did. Yeah. Now it takes a certain,
takes a certain type of person to
she just went on. Yeah.
Yeah, she's very dynamic, wasn't she? And very dynamic. Just like on to the next thing.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah. And there's a solution. You know, one of the things she thought that every hospital would have a machine that could 3D print hearts, so people would be off the donor list. Yeah. And she wanted, her own application was, she wanted to make a womb because she was born without one. Yeah. And so she could have children, and she wanted to help other infertile women. Yeah, you know? So part of that is happening now. Certainly the heart. Yeah. They made a tiny little heart in Israel last year, actually. So, you know, other people are continuing on what she started. And this is a woman who was born in Tala in Dublin and worked in Cork. You know, she is among us.
Yeah, I know. It's amazing. So what would be your final words for everybody listening on moving from fear to trust?
It's Erica Young, you know, feel the fear and do it anyway. I think you talk about moving beyond your comfort zone. And sometimes I think one of my greatest releases, if you like, I used to work in production as production editor in the Irish Independent for many years. And then it got smaller and there were redundancies and I was made redundant. And like some people think that's a terrible thing, but it gave me space to kind of listen to myself and just to stop and take stock and listen to that inner voice and believe in possibilities. You know, the world is much more varied and it can hold more things than we might believe, you know, because I remember when I was working, you know, I was in a very well-paid job, but it was also, the hours were long and it didn't leave space for anything else. And then suddenly when you're cut loose, lots of other things bubble to the surface. Yeah. And, you know, that can be a scary place to be. But, you know, and you don't have to make a career to pay the mortgage, you know, just listen to your creative spirit. You can do something else to pay the mortgage and pay the bills, but make sure to leave time to do whatever it is inside you. I think it's really important.
Wonderful. So Clodagh, thank you so much for
Thank you
coming
so
on here
much.
today.
Oh,
It's
it's
been such a
lovely.
pleasure, and I feel very nourished and even more inspired to move from fear to trust from this conversation. And I highly recommend everyone listening to get their copy of Through Her Eyes, and gift that even to women in your life, because I think
Absolutely.
we need these stories, and even to bring these into the conversations with the family, which would be a great
Stories for
opportunity.
2020.
Story for 2020.
20 stories for 2020.
Yeah.
There you go.
So tell everyone where they can find you online. So the book is available.
The book is available in all good bookstores. It's available online as well. And I'm on Twitter at Finn Clodagh, or you find me on Facebook. I'd love to know what women inspired you, or who you liked the best.
Yeah,
you'll find me on Facebook.
Lovely. I'll include all the links below this podcast, so you can contact Clodagh and let her know.
Tell me know. Yeah. Let me know. That'd be great.
Wonderful. So thank you so much.
Thank you
Clodagh.
so much. It's been a pleasure.
And Sophia is
with our own lady,
with our little mascot here. She's been nice and quiet, and we are
great,
delighted. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Aisling.
So when